Prohibition goes beyond the bounds of reason in that it attempts to control a man's appetite by legislation and makes a crime out of things that are not crimes.
My name is Dexter Morgan, and this is Dave McDowell.
We're here to talk to you today about a subject which is really controversial. It's been brought up by the public in protests, petitions, and many other forms. Their effort is almost always futile.
The US government is our main target today, as almost everything they do is always followed by Canadian politicians.
The quote I read about a minute ago was said by Abraham Lincoln, and it directly relates to the topic that we're about to talk about.
Today, we're going to talk about the prohibition of marijuana.
In 1619, Jamestown, Virginia's colony law declared that all settlers must grow hemp or cannabis on their farms. And in 1797, George Washington was growing hemp on Mount Vernon.
So then, on October the 2nd of 1937, the day that the Marijuana Tax Stamp Act was passed, Samuel Caldwell went to prison for 2 years for selling 2 joints without paying his taxes.
Now, remember, this is about 200 years after the United States was founded.
Since then, more and more laws have been passed prohibiting the use of marijuana.
Hemp is a really easy plant to grow. It's an annual plant that grows all year round and actually detoxifies the soil that it's grown on and enriches it.
Speaking of marijuana, they planted thousands of marijuana plants to detoxify the land after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, which happened decades ago in Ukraine.
Might I add, they also require very little pesticides to grow marijuana. And, well, for thousands of years, our ancestors have been using it for food, textiles, paper, fabric, and even oil. And since then, we've been coming up with more and more ways to use it, like alternatives to fuel.
The oil and seeds are full of protein, minerals, fiber, and amino acids, which makes it replace more destructive sources, such as overfishing.
Now, Dexter, can you tell me how long it takes for a tree to become harvestable?
Well, it has to be at least 30 years.
Well, guess what? Hemp is actually a lot more durable when it's turned into paper, and it can grow in about 3 months.
Well, Dave, did you know that the oldest discovered woven fabric was made of hemp?
Yeah, Dexter, I did it.
Oh.
Anyways, when hemp oil is burned, it actually produces a greenhouse gas which is much less harmful than carbon dioxide. And this is carbon monoxide.
What we're saying is that, in general, there has been little research done of hemp and its uses, but we're constantly coming up with more and more ways, from plastic alternatives to the foundations of building houses.
Now, Dexter, what do you say we move away from the industrial purposes and get to what people are a little bit more afraid of, like the personal uses?
Sure, Dave. How about we start with alcohol?
Great idea. Now, let me quiz you on this. How many people in the US die every year from alcohol-related deaths?
It's about 80,000.
And from smoking marijuana?
0.
Correct. Why keep something that is so harmful legal, yet keep something so harmless illegal?
Well, even if it were harmful, Dave, do you know how much more people would die if alcohol was prohibited?
That's exactly my point. When alcohol was being prohibited, we had people who were like Al Capone, who were killing other people just to get their hands on alcohol so they could sell it. And also, let's not forget that really harsh conditions that it was being created in, which got even more health problems.
Well, I'm sure many of us know at least one alcoholic, but much less of us know so-called potheads.
That's because marijuana is much less addictive. In a recent survey, we found out that about 100 million Americans have smoked marijuana at least once in their lives. Now, most of them just quit it. It was just a teenage phase in their lives, and they got over with it.
Not just that, Dave. I've heard many stories of alcoholic, abusive parents and that sort, but I've never heard of a guy getting high and hitting someone else.
People, listen to this fact. In 2009 alone, there were about 850,000 marijuana-related arrests, and about 750,000 of them were just because they were holding it. Now, possession is a victimless crime.
Did you know that smoking the marijuana doesn't make you kill? It's the huge profits coming from the sales that does.
Now, I don't know about everybody else there, but I pay my taxes, and I get really, really upset when I find out things like this.
I completely agree, Dave. I mean, why do we still have poverty, homelessness, etc., when we're willing to spend billions of dollars on arresting people who barely cause problems in society? I mean, the only reasons they do cause problems is because of the laws that we have in the first place.
Did you know that almost every country in the world criminalizes marijuana, and only 15 of them decriminalize it? There are no countries in the world where it's legal.
Why is this when two of the most deadly drugs in the world are legal in most places?
Which two drugs are you talking about?
Tobacco and alcohol, of course.
That's very true. There are lots of reasons for that, Dexter, but one off the top of my head would be, the huge amounts of profit that the pharmaceutical companies would lose.
Well, can't they just sell the marijuana and tax it themselves, making up for the loss of their money?
No, of course not. People nowadays trust the government as little as they can. Why would they buy it off the government when they can just grow it in their own homes? I mean, like I said earlier, marijuana is a very easy plant to grow.
Well, in Canada, it's already been decriminalized to use marijuana if you have a medical card. However, it's still really hard to get that card, and you could have to go through many other prescription drugs before they would actually let you smoke marijuana.
Yet, you're telling me this goes on when marijuana has the least amount of side effects and it's actually the safest one to use?
Yes, marijuana has been proven to work on patients who have had insomnia or have insomnia, since it relaxes people and allows them to be in a calmer state of mind.
Let's move on, shall we? Marijuana is also used by a lot of bodybuilders in order to relax their sore muscles after working out for a long day. And, well, if it's used for pain relief, then that would mean that companies like Tylenol and Advil would also go out of business.
Speaking of bodybuilders, instead of taking protein, shakes, or weight gainer, or any of that crap, most people just smoke marijuana, and they attain something that is called the munchies, which gets you a lot hungrier and allows you to eat a lot more food, and you can eat something more natural than all the protein powders, full of ingredients that give you kidney and liver disease.
Wow. Now, you see, Dexter, lots of people live under the misconception that smoking marijuana gives you diseases like lung cancer. Now, why don't we explain to them if that's true or not?
Well, studies have been done at hundreds of the top universities in the world on this topic, and the answer has always been no to cancer. In fact, research is still being done on the key ingredient of marijuana, which is THC, and how it may prevent cancer cells from developing.
True. Actually, many of the people who are taking those medical cards and putting them into use are people who are cancer patients. Why do they use it? Not to prevent the cancer. Well, lots of research has to still be done on that part, but they use it to get rid of the pain and be able to eat after the exhausting amounts of chemotherapy that they gotta go through.
This isn't to say that it's completely safe, of course. When people smoke marijuana, they tend to keep it in for longer amounts of time than, for example, smoking cigarettes, which makes the target absorb, causing more things like bronchitis and difficulty breathing.
Well, many companies have come up with new devices to get rid of those harmful effects of marijuana. Like these little machines known as vaporizers. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, actually.
Well, what they actually do is they heat the marijuana to a certain temperature which burns only the key ingredient, THC, which those patients with the medical cards need. And therefore, they don't absorb all the tar and other toxic chemicals in the marijuana.
We're reaching a conclusion, but we have one last thing to cover. Dave, it's extremely easy for people to attain marijuana, even maybe easier than alcohol.
Yeah.
You gotta drive over to the liquor store for alcohol when you can just call your weed guy and get your marijuana delivered to your house? Why do people still want marijuana to be legalized?
Well, even though it's really easy to get, the main reason is that, well, people don't trust their dealers. They don't know where the marijuana is being grown. They don't know what pesticides are being used on it. They don't know how it's being grown. Now, they would much rather get it from somewhere safe, like a government dispensary or their own garden.
I see. I hope the audience hasn't been too overwhelmed by all the information we just covered very quickly. But that's all the time we have for today.
Now, in no way did we mean to encourage smoking marijuana today. All we wanted to do is bring up a few points and reasons why it would be much better off being legal or something.
We hope you enjoyed this, and we hope you take a lot of this knowledge home. Tell your friends. Tell anybody that you know. Educate them about marijuana.
Thanks a lot for watching. And remember,
Don't do drugs.
thank you. Thank you. Please stop. Thank you. Thank you.